Hi, students. So, the next thing we're going to do in this unit number 2 is we're going to watch a modern example of spoken word poetry that has both literary and rhetorical power. So, Shane Koizon uses his personal story not just to tell you what happened to him, but also to create a sense of empathy and build connection, to encourage you to listen on your own and to hear your own experiences reflected back in what he's saying. I chose it because I think it raises some really interesting points about voice, audience, vulnerability, and empathy. So, what it's highlighting for you is the power that storytelling has to make you feel certain things. So, the poem he's going to do in this TED Talk is called To This Day for the Bullied and the Beautiful. So originally, the in 2010, the Winter Olympics were in Vancouver, Canada, and he's a Canadian poet who, at the Canadian Olympics, had performed a piece, and then TED, the organization TED that does TED Talks, reached out to him because at the time in 2013, one of the big things everyone was talking about was bullying. It had really only just become something we were talking about in the media, like in public conversation. So the project became well known not just as a performance piece for Shane, but also as an educational resource for anti-bullying advocacy, and it encouraged a lot of conversations about identity, trauma, resilience, and healing. It's about bullying and the lasting impact that harsh words have on children. It also uncovers something that we learned through research during this time, which is that most of the people who are bullies were also bullied. Now, logically, if you were thinking about it, you might think, well, if they know how it feels to be bullied, then they certainly wouldn't do it to someone else, right? That is not actually true. A lot of the people who have been bullied have also been bullies, so they've perpetrated the crime also, as well as been a victim. I have a husky puppy. He's very vocal. I'm going to see if I can get him to shush for a minute. So, one of the ways that we can solve some of these problems in our society is by having conversations about it. Conversations that are open, vulnerable, raw, where we're really explaining both perspectives and we're looking into this with a level of curiosity instead of judgment, right? The husky. Just 1 minute. I feel at this point he just wants to be in the video, so I might have to pull him up here in a minute. Okay, anyways, so it's one of the best ways that we can curb problems that we have, like bullying. So I want you to pay attention as you watch this to his voice, his tone, the rhythm, the pacing, and the emotional intensity. I also want you to pay attention to the audience response. Okay? So go ahead and watch the video. So pause me here, go watch the video, and then come back and we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so you may notice that spoken word poetry often depends on a live or an imagined audience. So there are some spoken word poets on TikTok who are speaking to more of an imaginary audience. I mean, it's a real audience in the fact that there are real people out there watching their TikToks, but it's an imagined audience for the person giving the spoken word poetry. And that often uses rhetorical devices like vivid imagery, personal narratives, repetition, and direct address to build empathy and connection. And so, what you may have noticed in the poem you just watched, the spoken word piece you just watched, is that you may have felt like you identified either as a victim or a perpetrator with Shane as he was speaking, or with some of the people he was speaking about. And when he does that, when he can create a situation where you identify with him, then what's actually happening is you're relating, you're reflecting, and you're feeling very seen and heard. So personal narratives are something that is used in almost every industry. Most of the music you listen to is in some way, shape, or form a narrative. So he shares his own personal vulnerability, his pain, his shame, his doubt, as a way in which he builds credibility and trust with you as his audience. And that openness creates this really powerful effect. He doesn't just convey knowledge to you in forging a shared space of vulnerability for himself and for you as his audience. He's actually creating a place where you can feel a sense of solidarity, and healing can take place. Healing conversations can happen there also. So the poem also works rhetorically by moving from the individual, where he's talking about when he was a kid, to a collective. In other words, there's so many of us who have experienced this, and he starts talking about other people's experience. So when he does that, it invites you to identify either as the bullied or the beautiful. He's inviting you to rewrite the narrative. He's inviting you to come in and say, yes, that's true about me too. And I also want to rewrite my story the way you just rewrote yours. So something that happens during this is he reframes a painful experience. He could just talk about how scarred he was. He could just talk about how painful it was. He could just talk about how it's ruined his entire life, right? But he doesn't. What he does is he reframes the narrative to suggest that these scars he carries and the scars that you carry are actually a symbol of strength and resilience. And these scars are marks of a warrior, someone who's strong, not someone who's weak, right? So by shifting the tone from one of victimhood over to personal agency, where you're in control of the narrative, that's what that means, you get this meaningful example. And this is an example of what you can do in your own life. Other people are always going to want to write a narrative for you. Teachers, friends, romantic partners, your family is your first experience probably with other people writing your narrative. And in all of these cases, you have the power to take whatever's been said about you and whatever narrative someone else has spun out of your circumstances, and you have the power and the agency to write your narrative, to make it, instead of a story of shame and disgrace, to make it into a story of strength and accomplishment. And it's what you should do, because it's your life. It's not anyone else's. So, storytelling gives us this chance to create an environment of shared meaning making. Meaning, as humans, we've always been storytelling creatures. Before we had TV, what did we have? We had movies and radio. And before we had movies, we at least had radio. And before we had radio, what did we have? We had that one uncle who was so good at storytelling. We had people in our communities who were professional storytellers. We had campfires where we all sat around and told stories, right? And we told stories before bed that were fables. We told stories that were fairy tales. We told parables that pointed you in the right way to live. We had Aesop's fables, right? We had a lot of stories. And these stories are part of our identities, but they're also the way we make sense out of the world. So when Shane tells his story, he transforms his private pain into public meaning making. And he does that with you. And that act invites other people who have been silenced, isolated, or shamed to recognize themselves in his story and in his words and to create the same meaning out of their own lives. So, I'm sorry, I lost my place for a minute. So the phrase "to this day" becomes a little bit of a mark in time. It becomes a collective marker of time and endurance, giving voice to the unspoken experiences maybe that you carry. It also, Kenneth Burke had a concept of identification in rhetoric where audiences bond when they see parts of themselves in a speaker. We all love an underdog story. Why do we love them so much? Because they remind us of ourselves. Because sometimes we feel like underdogs too, right? And so even if you haven't faced bullying, you've probably felt misunderstood or diminished by someone else. And having those emotions expressed aloud can really validate and normalize them. It reduces the stigma and it increases the empathy of the community around you. And people start to realize I'm not alone and neither are you, right? So when empathy is able to scale from an individual level to a group level, it lays down the conditions that are required for communal healing and a collective catharsis. So Aristotle coined the term catharsis and felt that art could purge or release pent-up emotions. In spoken word poetry, like Cousins, uses voice, rhythm, and imagery to build tension. If you noticed, he started quiet and it built to a peak where the music started, got louder, 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 and then it started to come down, right? That's the buildup of tension. You see that when you're reading a story or you're writing a screenplay or you're writing something. You see this buildup of tension and then it falls off, right? So it allows the audience to have a collective exhale. And that shared catharsis can foster connection across very diverse audiences. It's a moment where we all feel that we have come together in this one way together. So when you were looking at the audience, did you see them crying, nodding, or laughing together at some of the really vulnerable truths he was sharing? Trauma research also shows that healing's going to deepen when someone's pain is witnessed, acknowledged, and affirmed by others. So he isn't just telling his story, he's turning himself inside out on stage for you. And he's saying, this is what happened to me, and I see you. I see you if it happened to you too. And that witnessing, when a room full of people nod together, sigh together, applaud together, it validates not just the performer's pain, it also validates the lived experience of pain of everyone in the room. It also reframes identity. The central move into this day is a shift from being defined by labels like freak or loser to claiming a new identity as the beautiful. And that rhetorical reframing models for us how we can rewrite our own internal scripts. And that's what we're going to talk about this week, is the way in which we speak to ourselves. In a communal setting like a class, this creates really amazing opportunities for you to explore your own communication scars and begin reshaping them into strengths. Now, we're not in class together, but I'm trying very hard to recreate for you the environment that we typically have in class. And at the end of a class like this, typically we all know a whole lot about each other. And honestly, it's a positive experience for everyone. I can't reach through the screen and do that with you or to you. I know that you have a different perception of time and the amount of time you have to study if you're taking online courses. So I'm trying to give you some of the same experiences that my in-person classes get between you and I. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And in modern times, we're more and more seeing classrooms as healing spaces because, we're supposed to be preparing you for new careers, new lives, new everything. And one of the things that is a constant is that companies will hire you based on your skill set, right? And so let's say you're going to be a welder and you're an amazing welder. Well, you're going to get promoted. And then eventually you're going to get promoted to the point where they're going to make you a manager of people. But when did anyone ever teach you about people? Like, you know how to weld, not necessarily how to herd cats/humans. So more and more colleges are trying to add in some components of courses, and communication just happens to be one of those subjects where you do a lot of real world experimenting. So honestly, it's great ground for this kind of a conversation. So when we start talking about speeches, communication is not just about speeches. It's about human connection and care. Vulnerability, that one didn't come out right. Okay, hold on. Vulnerability is not about weakness. Vulnerability is a bridge to belonging. So imagine you lay yourself open and you allow someone else to know you. If you just got really terrified when I said that, you're not alone. None of us really want to do that. And why don't we want to do that? Because there are some not very kind people out in the world who will take advantage of the fact that you're being vulnerable and will try to hurt you. Usually people have very high walls around their heart because they have previously been hurt. But here is my admonishment to you. Here is what I'd like for us to try to accomplish in this class. You can have high walls. You probably need to have high walls. That's okay. But build in a trap door. Build in a door on hinges so that you can open it and let in the people who mean good things for you. Okay? Make sure you have a door, because if your walls are so high, no one will ever be able to climb them. They don't know you. They're just going to see the wall and kind of turn away. So make sure you have a way to let people in. So being vulnerable, learning how to bring our defenses down when we want to, is really important, because there are people in your life who want to be close to you, who want good things for you, who you want to be close to, and those walls can be a barrier to those relationships. So my hope is that we're able to create a space where our classroom, even the online portion of our classroom, is not just academic, but it's a communal place of healing and growth. So, storytelling, the fact that this poem became widely known and became a crowdsourced animated video really underscores how digital media can extend the reach of spoken word poetry, bringing performance poetry into classrooms, social campaigns, and even global conversations. So, the visual animation plus the spoken word plus the music backing really amplifies the message and made it much more unique. So, I want you to think about what he did with his voice, tone, and pacing that helped you connect to what he was saying. And did you find his argument persuasive? Did any of the visual imagery tug at you? What part of the poem for you was the most impactful or memorable, and why? So, I think one of the things we're going to do in the coming weeks is we're going to tell our own stories. So I really want to encourage you, no matter what has been said about you, who it's been said by, I want to really encourage you to reframe those narratives from a place of shame to a place of victory. So I really hope you enjoyed this poem. I hope it meant something to you. And if you want to answer any of the questions I asked at the end of the video, please answer them in the comments on YouTube. You can email them to me, whatever you want to do. But let me know what you thought. Did this poem speak to you?